Joining me today is Olivia Enos, a senior policy analyst in the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation. Olivia, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
And I really should say welcome back, because last time you joined me, we were talking about this controversial security law in Hong Kong that was only a worst case scenario for Hong Kong and for its people, and now it has officially passed as of Tuesday. So I want to talk to you about what exactly this means for the people of Hong Kong.
This is pretty remarkable. As you mentioned, it was a possibility that it was going to happen. Now it's a reality. And we're looking at, basically the one country, two systems framework that has governed Hong Kong since the handover from the British back to China in 1997, basically crumbling before our very eyes. And, this is really concerning because the national security law itself essentially makes very vague terms illegal. They make sedition illegal, talk of secession illegal, so-called foreign collusion and terrorism illegal. But they don't mean those words in the way that we mean them. What they really mean is all of the pro-democracy protests that we saw last year are not going to be able to continue. And I think that's being made evident by the fact that last night, literally the first day that the national security law was in effect, over 300 protesters were arrested, 9 of which are believed to be charged under the national security law specifically. And so we're already seeing the authorities in Beijing making swift action and making use of this law. So I think we need to watch very carefully in the days and weeks ahead to see exactly how it unfolds and how it's implemented.
Yes, I know you just mentioned people getting arrested. I think I got a push notification maybe at like 3:30 last night / this morning about the first person being arrested under this new security law, which means they're obviously very serious about this. They have been from the beginning. And right after we did our first interview together, I spoke with Joshua Wong, who is a pro-democracy activist in Hong Kong. And, he was saying that, if this were to pass, of course, this was before it did pass, this was a couple of weeks ago, the possible danger that even he could be in. So for people like Joshua, for people that are pushing for democracy, what does this mean for them? I mean, are their lives in danger now?
Yeah, the national security law is really just like the next step in Beijing's attempt to undermine freedom in Hong Kong. And I think that it's really important to keep the various subjects separate. The national security law poses a really severe threat to political freedoms. It might not pose as severe a threat to economic freedoms in Hong Kong. And I think that we are going to continue to see this steady erosion, perhaps expedited by the national security law that's passed. But it really is going to continue to be sort of an overtime development. So Hong Kong doesn't become like Beijing or even like Xinjiang, where of course we know there's between 1 and 3 million Muslim Uyghurs held in political re-education facilities today. It's not going to turn into that overnight. But for people like Joshua Wong or Martin Lee, who was, the founder of Hong Kong, essentially, he created the basic law. This is definitely going to be a very threatening time. It's not the first time that they've been under threat. I think, Joshua Wong and Nathan Law, Martin Lee, all of them have been arrested or called in for questioning before. And I think that, people who are really devoted to the cause of liberty in Hong Kong are going to continue to be strident and stalwart in their efforts. And we have to do all that we can to support their liberties. So I think, right now the U.S. has a lot of latitude, even though Secretary Pompeo did decertify Hong Kong, did report to Congress that Hong Kong is no longer sufficiently autonomous from Beijing to merit separate status. Both Congress and the executive have a lot of latitude in defining what exactly that means. And so we need to identify policy areas that prioritize the freedom and liberties of the Hong Kong people while still holding authorities in Beijing accountable.
You mentioned Secretary of State Pompeo, he of course held a press conference this morning, just talking about, among other things, but of course this new security law that was just passed. He has tweeted that this new security law ends free Hong Kong and exposes the party's greatest fear, the free will and free thinking of its own people. Do you agree with this statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the Chinese Communist Party is responsible for any attempts at undermining freedom in Hong Kong. It is the Chinese Communist Party's decision to intervene in Hong Kong, to undermine its judiciary, to press the Hong Kong Legislative Council last year to try and pass that extradition bill, and now finally to actually institute a national security law that imperils freedom there. So we have to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable, absolutely, for that. And so I think there may be some attempts. I mean, certainly under the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, we do have the authority to actually use targeted financial against individuals and entities in Hong Kong responsible for undermining freedom. Those types of things should definitely be on the table. But I don't think it's necessarily the end of freedom in Hong Kong. I think that if policymakers are smart, if we play our cards right, I think that we can safeguard, what limited freedoms are left, and we need to think through strategically what that's going to look like. I also think that in the event that Beijing really, just kind of pulls the final straw, in the event that they engage in some sort of military intervention in Hong Kong, and we, to be clear, don't know the extent to which the national security law kind of already permits that. We should absolutely be ready at the helm to extend priority to refugee status to Hong Kongers, to give them safe haven, like we've seen the Brits doing, and even, I think, very boldly, Taiwan has offered as well. And so these are the types of things we need to be thinking about.
Well, I'm sure, this conversation is obviously not going away anytime soon. It feels like it just continues ramping up, and especially with the coronavirus, it seems like China is always making headlines. So hopefully, you'll join me again, maybe for maybe some better discussion about China. But Olivia Enos of the Heritage Foundation, thanks for joining me, and have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me.